Wait, hold on. All right. Hello, Miss Guevara. How are you doing today? It's nice to see you.
Hi, Miss B.Jakl. It's so great to see you too. I am doing very well. Thank you for asking.
Great. Well, I'm excited to learn a little bit more about you. But first, have you had a chance to look at West Valley Elementary's social media accounts or school website?
I must admit, yes, I did take a moment to look at
Great.
West Valley's Facebook page and their Twitter site and your Twitter site, and it was pretty exciting to see all the engagements that you put on throughout the entire school year, and just to see what a close knit community I really think that West Valley Elementary has established. It seems like the culture is very family oriented, and it was enjoyable for me to look through.
Great. We love that. We love to hear that. We've really just gotten started with the social media and things in the last few years. And so I think that it really helps show everyone exactly what we're about. So great. Well, some of the information then that I'm about to go over may be a little redundant since you did check out some of our sites. But I like to give all of my prospective staff members just kind of a quick background on the school and myself a little bit. Okay. So West Valley Elementary, we were established. We're a pretty old school, as you can tell just by the building. We've been around since 1949. And of course, it started back then as just a small little six-room neighborhood school. And over the years, though, our community has grown up here in North Houston, and so did our school. And at one point, our highest enrollment was actually over 1,000 students. Um, but since then, they've built several new elementary schools to help alleviate the over congestion. And now we have a consistent enrollment, though, of about 700 students a year. So still fairly large considering how many schools we have directly around us. I am the eighth principal at West Valley Elementary. So as long as we've been open, there haven't been a whole lot of principals. But I have been acting principal for 5 years. And before that, I was the assistant principal for 3 years before the prior principal moved on to a different position in the district. Our school community is amazing. Like you said, we are a very tight knit, family oriented community, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But we are a Title I school, and we actually have about 97% of our students living below what's considered the poverty line. So they do all receive free breakfast and free lunch. And we also have a high population of English language learners. So actually 89% of our students have Spanish listed as their primary language in the home. So we do have a lot of ELLs. Even though our students do have a long list of struggles and obstacles, like most people associate with a Title I school, we don't let that get in the way or give them pity. Okay, they don't want that. We hold them super high. We have high expectations for all of our kids, both academically and behaviorally. And I think that those high expectations and those high standards are why we consistently receive such an effective rating from our state. Okay. Our students also score really well every year in the STAR and other standardized testing. And I think it's because my teachers and staff work hard all year to make sure that we are giving the best to our students every day and that we hold them accountable. So now that you have a little bit more information about our school community, I'm going to ask you a few questions so that I can learn more about you, okay?
Okay.
All right. So can you first start off by telling me a little bit about your previous teaching experiences, like the grade levels, contents, things like that?
For about 12 years, I taught pre-K through kinder and sometimes first grade in a private school setting. It was a Montessori school located here in Houston. And
Okay.
after that, I've been teaching for the past 6 years in a public school. I've taught second grade and third grade.
Oh,
Um,
great. All right. And did you have any specific content, I'm sorry, that you taught during those times?
oh, yes, ma'am. I failed to mention I've been teaching math and science. And then for 1 year, I did teach all subjects. And then for the past 2 years, I've been teaching solely math and science and social studies to my homeroom. And
Great. All right. So it sounds like you've had a lot of experience in multi grades. That's great. Um, so if I were to call your principal, and
okay.
it's okay if you have to think for a minute about this one, and I asked for 3 words to describe you as a person, what would what 3 words do you think that they would say?
Um, I think my former principals would say that I'm definitely dependable. I'm resourceful and effective. Effective.
And effective. That's a good one. Those are great words. Actually, thinking about that resourceful one, can you think of a specific example of how you demonstrated your resourcefulness over the last few years?
Okay, well, especially in the spring since COVID has started and we had to go remote. I
Yeah.
think that was definitely one of my most resourceful moments when I had to learn very quickly how to put together virtual lessons, live lessons, as well as asynchronous lessons for students to accomplish outside of our live lessons. And I wanted to make sure that I was not only an effective teacher virtually, but that the students were continuing their learning. And I had
Yeah.
some different programs. I had to also depend on my team, and we all just really collaborated and became really resourceful together, sharing. And I think that's pretty important too. But yeah, it was pretty challenging initially, and then
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, I think we were all kind of in the same boat last spring when all of that came up for sure. I think we all found our resourcefulness within us for sure. Great, thank you so much. And I love how you talked about collaboration. We're actually going to talk a little bit more about that later. But based on a little bit of what I know about you, but are there any special talents that you could bring to our school community? Because just as a background, we do hold after school clubs at our school on Mondays and Fridays for about an hour and a half to give our kids extra outlet for creativity and things like that. Would you, so one, would you be willing to sponsor a club? And two, if you were, do you bring any kind of special talent that you could bring to our kids that maybe they don't have access to normally?
yes, absolutely. I was very active in the extracurricular after school activities in my previous schools.
Great.
And I led classes like I led an art class
Oh,
one semester, I led a dance class another semester, and I led a yoga class
oh,
for 2 semesters.
oh, wow.
And then I think there's a couple of others too. But yeah, I'd be definitely interested in supporting the after school activities at West Valley Elementary. I think kids really tend to connect and need to see their teachers and other aspects outside of the classroom, and extracurriculars are a perfect place for that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, and that's why we started them here at West Valley because our students, like I've stated before, we are in an area where they don't necessarily all have access to these types of things, sports, dance classes, things like that on their own. And it gives them a nice way to start the week and end the week with a little bit of extra time with their teachers, excuse me, and to be a little creative. So great, thank you so much. So here's another question for you that I think will let me get to know you a little bit more. But how do you reach all of your learners? Like, what exactly do you do to make sure that you're reaching all of the learners in your classroom?
Well, I like to make sure that I am teaching to all learning modalities, especially, kids really like the movement and the total body response or total physical response when it comes to lessons, and really making those big movements for things like when I teach place value, units, tens, hundreds, thousands, or ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, and using gestures and songs and chants, even in other areas, other subject areas like science, giving them lots of visuals. I think that's very important, especially for ELL students, having
Yeah.
visual to go along with your lesson, anchor charts. And then really, again, they really like the total physical response, and songs. I
Yeah.
really creative songs out there for subject matter and content. So.
Yeah, there definitely are. I've heard some great ones, but yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, I love walking into a classroom and seeing kids moving. I feel like a quiet classroom, there's a time and a place for that. But for the most part, I love to hear sound coming from the classrooms because it tells me that there's learning going on. And I feel like the kids are engaged that manner. Great. So how do you know now you know how you reach your students, but like exactly how do you know when or if they're learning?
Well, so if I were to do like total physical response for place value. I'll go back to that. And the ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, or the number forms. I also do gestures and such for that. I like to see them use those gestures to help recall what it is exactly that I'm asking them in a question. And then I also like to emphasize them answering in complete sentences to me.
Mm.
Because I think that helps them communicate their mastery. And then I like to transfer that into writing a complete sentence, writing their thoughts, and being able to communicate their mastery that way as well. So if they're not getting it, then I like to then put together small groups and that sort of thing. I also like to make sure that I'm checking for understanding quite frequently. I think that's also important to know whether who's all with you and who's not, so that you could either change it up or take another approach.
Okay, great. And when you're talking about, I love that hold your student, again, like I mentioned before, we hold our students to really high expectations. So I love that complete sentence, either orally or in writing. Do you have a strategy that you would use for, since we have such a high ELO population, is there a strategy that you can think of that you would use for them?
Absolutely. I love sentence stems, and I love giving them, it's called QSSA, where
Oh,
you
yeah.
them, and it's like a strategy where you give them the question and you give them, of course, you know about it, the opportunity of how to respond. And then, of course, you could do think, pair, shares, that sort of thing, and
Yeah,
give them the opportunity to respond in a
that's
way.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love the QSSA actually. We actually did a training on that last year as a staff. That was one of the things that I trained my staff on as a quick way to do a CFU or a check for understanding. So that's great. What are some other CFUs? I know you mentioned them, but what are some others besides maybe the QSSA or Think Pair Share that you can think of that you use for CFUs?
Um, there's a wagon wheel that we try to do. There's also like chalk talk, where I'll have them write down their answer on a poster paper that I post to a question that I place in the classroom, and then they can all go around and read each other's responses and respond to them. Uh,
Good.
I've tried a couple of them.
Yeah, there's hundreds out there. So yeah, no, that's great. I like that wagon wheel one. I'd have to ask you more about that. Yeah, I'd have to ask you more about that one because I don't really know much about that one. Thank you. Uh, so now that I know you can reach your learners, you are making sure that they're learning through the checks for understanding. How do you use your data though from assessments and things like that to differentiate your instruction?
So I like to constantly collect data on the students. I know that there's BOYs, MOYs, EOYs, but I also think that in your daily lesson, those checks for understanding are crucial, as well as the do nows and the exit tickets. So I think that you can begin your lesson with a do now, and that kind of brings back into the child's forefront of their memory of what they learned yesterday. So it's almost like a refresher. And based on that, you can kind of tell what your small groups are going to be for either reteach. Maybe the whole group didn't understand, so you might have to do a reteach. Maybe it was just a couple selected few students that you have to build a small group over, that certain thing. But yeah, data collecting is what I do to drive my instruction, and that lets me know how effective I am, what I need to do differently, and what I need to do better, I guess, improve on.
Yeah.
Um,
No, that's great.
I
So,
reflect.
oh, I'm sorry. So to continue on with the differentiation or how to use your data to differentiate on our campus, um, this year one of our biggest focuses are going to be on using data to drive our lesson planning because even though we do really well in state testing and as a school in whole, we still have some gaps that we need to fulfill, especially for our special populations, such as our special education students, our 504s, even our GT. Actually, we're not seeing as much growth within our GT community as we would hope. And I think it's because sometimes teachers get focused on those middle students, right? So are you familiar? One of our big focuses this year is to fill those gaps. So, to fill those gaps, we're really focusing on doing backward design as far as lesson planning. Have you heard of backward design?
I have
Okay.
about that.
Okay, great. Okay, so can you tell me a little bit? Have you used backward design, or do you have any?
Is it where you teach with the end in mind? Is that what
Yes.
you're
Yeah, that's it.
I
Yeah.
the content that I'm trying to have the children master by the end of the day, the end of the week, what have you, then I would make sure that I teach that content pretty consistently,
Hmm.
um, with the multi-modalities to reach all my different learners, and then maybe incorporate some workstations on that so that by the end of the week or by the end of the day or after eight
Yeah.
minutes, if it's the CFU, I have the data that I need to make sure that they've mastered the concept.
Okay, great.
And
And
I, as
I'm
far as
sorry.
like
No, no,
reaching
go ahead.
reaching the special populations like the GT students, I think having, sometimes they get the lesson so quickly that you have to make sure to challenge them. And I love to incorporate projects, and
Oh,
I make
yeah.
them available to all the students if they're interested in doing it. And I don't want it to be, oh, this is just a GT project. So I put it out there, and if they're interested, they're allowed to do it during the workstation time. But I definitely
Great.
put it together for my GT students to extend their learning and kind of build on some of their interests as it relates to the content that we're studying that week or for that month.
That's great. I love to hear project based. That's one of the things that we as a school community have been struggling with is definitely our very low babies, our special ed population, because showing growth within them is possible. And I think sometimes we forget that it's possible with them. And then, of course, our high kids, because, like you said, that project based learning is something we need to work on as a community. So I love to hear that you've already been incorporating that. So maybe you can even teach us a little bit about that.
I'm also,
So, oh,
is
go
it
ahead.
okay if I just, in my previous schools, I've also been pretty active in STEAM, and
Oh, okay.
um, those types of, I would call them projects, but it's more like how you build it into the curriculum. I mean, you could have a STEM project for just about anything, even reading
Oh,
or
yeah.
language. And then
Yeah.
if
And
you
that,
incorporate art, then we call it STEAM. So I'm pretty active and familiar with how to get those types of projects going within a classroom.
great. I have a couple other teachers on campus who've been slowly starting to implement those things. So I think if you guys all work together, we could really get some great development going with that. Thank you so much for sharing. Um, so to keep going with our teaching, and growth is really important as an educator, which I'm sure you're aware of. But I want you to recall a teaching experience that went poorly anytime in your career, which I'm sure we all can think of at least one.
Yeah.
And what would you do differently this time around, thinking back and reflecting?
Well, I think I would just be like a real human in front of the kids, like, and say, "Oh, I made a mistake, and I didn't mean to say
Mhm.
that way or teach that way. I'm going to try this way." And I think I would place it on me and my mistake versus them not getting it, because in the end, my lesson was bad because I XYZ reason. And I think
Mhm.
that it's important to make sure that you're just like a human being. And the kids are so sweet and forgiving, and they can change paces with you just as quickly as you made that mistake. And they're ready to jump on board when you're like, okay, that way was not the correct way. Let me just go this way. I think that they're so forgiving.
Yeah.
So
No, that's really great to hear because we always want our kids to take ownership or the students to take ownership of their actions or their words or their abilities. And as teachers, we need to be able to do that as well. We're not perfect, right? We're teachers, we're humans, so we all make mistakes. Great. So, if a student in your class, not, I will say on our campus, we do not have large behavior issues. We're pretty well behaved, students, but of course, there will be a few that want to push your buttons every now and then. But how would you deal with that student who is consistently not following your classroom rules or school rules?
well, I used to, when I taught preschool, one of the things that it was a Montessori school, and so it's basically a philosophy where we focus on the whole child. And I was very active with parent workshops, especially on discipline. And one of the most important things I think when any child misbehaves is that you give them an opportunity to do better, and you
Mhm.
frame it in a very positive way, because each of us has a bad moment or a bad, day, so to speak. But you have the opportunity to frame it in a positive way. So if they're having a bad moment, it looks like you're needing some time. So you maybe need a break. And in a public school classroom, that could translate into maybe going to the restroom, putting water on their face, or getting a drink of water. And then coming back and being ready for a fresh start. And then also giving the child the opportunity to have a moment, take a deep breath, cool down. It doesn't have to be a big deal. You don't deal about it in the classroom, and have them tell you when they're ready. But if it's some, there's a lot of different ways. Maybe all you need is to go over and, whisper, "Oh, you can do it," or if you need a break, it could start off very small and doesn't have to be a big production. It could be very positive, and sometimes just that small connection can make the biggest difference between the child and the teachers. Hey, they noticed me. My teacher noticed I was having a hard time, and they came over, and you know what? Now I'm going to do a little bit better.
That's great. Yeah, I love to hear that. Yeah, at this school, we do definitely want our teachers to try their best to handle the situation in the classroom. So I love to hear that you're right. Kids have bad days. They're humans just like we are. We all have bad days, and sometimes their little brains can't handle how to express that frustration or that feeling, so they just act out. So great. And that kind of brings me into, how do you communicate with your parents?
Oh, I'm
Like,
used to like daily communicate. Well,
okay.
if a call is needed, I like to reach out at the beginning of the year via a phone call.
Great.
To touch base with all my parents, introduce myself so they can see me, hear my voice before meet the teacher at the beginning of the school year. And then I like to invite them to open house, which is actually a couple of weeks after the school year begins. And then I let them know in that same conversation that they can connect with me on Dojo, and that I get their information, because I like to use Classroom Dojo to, it's like a tech. Are you familiar with it? It's like a tech.
Yeah, we actually use it on campus. Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
So I love that system, and I think it's great because parents can send you a message, you can send them a message right back, and it acts like a text message. And if you need to call someone or schedule a conference, it's a really quick, text-like message, and then you can get back really quickly.
Yes. Yeah, because in our community, technology can be an issue for some of our kids, but they all have cell phones. All the parents have cell phones. So we have found that anything that revolves around an app that can be downloaded easily on a cell phone is definitely the go-to for us more than anything. Social media, definitely. And it's just like that.
And when parents have that phone call at the beginning of the year, I think it makes the rest of the year kind of fit into place, and they feel comfortable reaching out to you whenever they might have a question, or want to talk to you about maybe what their child's doing. Or
Yeah, it's good to get those positive calls.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So, I know earlier you mentioned collaboration with your team in the spring because of everything that was going on. So, what exactly would you consider your collaboration style? Like, do you like to work with other team members, like large groups, content groups, team, just your partner, or more alone? Which some teachers do like to work more alone. But what's your style?
I'm very comfortable working with large groups. In my previous schools, I was the team lead. And so I worked with 5 teachers who were in second grade with me. And I was basically the person they went to if they needed help. I was a person that shared out important deadlines or school-wide news and memos. And I'm also comfortable with, taking the lead. If I need to work on a project on my own, I can do that as well. I can work with large groups, a group of 5, or I'm very comfortable working with in a team or on my own. So
Okay.
and I was put in charge of a project on campus, I could coordinate that.
But when it comes to lesson planning, do you prefer to work with your partner or your content team?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think it's very beneficial to make sure that when you're teaching a certain subject, like I have experience teaching in math and science, that you work vertically and across your grade level to make sure that your lessons are aligned, so that in second grade, if an administrator comes into a math class and the math class is teaching greater than less than, you don't want to go into another math class that's also in second grade and they're teaching geometry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you got to keep alignment. That's another one of our focuses for this year,
So
is
I
making sure we're all aligned. Yeah.
for
So how do you cultivate positive relationships and a sense of community in your classroom with the students?
I think threshold is a very important aspect of starting the day off, greeting a child and making sure that you've established a connection with them first thing in the morning. So every moment thereafter, they're not hesitant to ask you for anything if they need a pencil or if they're having a bad day or if they need to go to the restroom or get a drink of water. I think that develops a close knit family like community with the students, as well as touching base with them, maybe doing a emotional check in. I
Yeah.
also have morning meetings with the students
Yeah.
too, where we kind of talk about what we're going to be doing for the day and what we can expect to happen that day, what we're going to be learning, and maybe just they can share out too if they have something exciting to share too, like something that's happening in their family.
That's great to hear. Yeah, no, I love the idea of a morning meeting. In HISD, which I know you're coming from another school in HISD, so you're familiar with the fact that their big push the last 2 or 3 years has been SEL, or that social emotional learning. And so I really think that morning meeting really feeds into that, because it allows the kids, to feel like they're a little family, right? So this will be the last one for me. So let's just think of this. So, like we said, stated earlier, as a teacher, we need to always, or as an educator, we need to always reflect and be willing to grow and learn as the times change. But how do you maintain your own professional development? And what areas would you select for your own personal growth?
Okay, so I am a professional development fanatic. I feel like I like to geek out on professional development. The district that I'm coming from offers professional development throughout the summer and, of course, periodically throughout the school year. And I'm always itching to find out what they're going to be offering and when throughout the summer those professional developments are going to take place. If I had to select, I also like reading professional development books. But if I had to select specifically what I've been currently reading about lately, is I'm trying to hone and really hone in on higher order thinking questions. And so
Mm.
for some of the professional developments that I like to seek, and books like that I like to search for on Amazon or online.
Yeah, great. No, yeah, the district definitely offers some great trainings,
Okay.
um, online and in person when we're allowed to do that again, but mostly online for now. So I love to hear that. Yeah, I also am a professional development fanatic, and I really enjoy reading PD books. As an administrator, we don't get quite as many of the hands-on professional developments anymore. But I still like to attend some of the ones that I ask my teachers to attend, so that I can hear the same information, and so that they know that I'm just as involved as they are in that. Because just because I'm the principal doesn't mean that I don't want to ever learn about what's going on in the teaching world anymore. Um, so let's take the last few minutes to see if you have any questions for me.
I do actually. I really enjoy going back to that first question of I did kind of look into what West Valley Elementary was all about on social media. And it did appear that everything was just so family oriented and there was a great connection. I just kind of want to know a little bit about the team I'm going to be working with.
Oh yeah, of course. No, that's
Weird, but
yeah. Yeah. So if you were to join our faculty, the team that you would be a part of in second grade, they've been working together for 2 years. The teacher that I am actually the position I'm trying to replace, that teacher actually retired. So the other four teachers have all been here for, on average, about 7 years. So not all of them in second grade. They've kind of fluctuated, a few of them between second and third. We did looping for a few years. We don't really do that consistently anymore. But every now and then I ask a teacher to loop, just depending. They are a very strong team, I will say. The team lead is a great leader. She's very easy to work with, from what I've been told from all of her team members, and that they are always incredibly aligned. They're one of our strongest teams in alignment, meaning that I know that they're always planning together, whether they're the bilingual teachers or the monolingual, they're always teaching the same things. Um, Not necessarily the same way, which is totally fine. Teachers are teachers, but you can tell that they closely work together, okay? And so I think you would fit right in with them in the sense of that collaboration and being able to work together and be aligned. You would be the math science. I'm looking for the math science teacher, of course, as you know. And so your partner teacher would be the ELA or reading language arts and social studies teacher. So you guys would just share students and they would go back and forth between you.
Okay. I do have another question.
Sure.
Can you talk about the events, more about the events? Because I saw that also on the social media sites that you have. Can you talk about parent involvement and
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so as you can see, we do hold quite a few events in our neighborhood, our school community. Like I said, kind of when I did the background, even though our school has grown so much over the last, 70 years that we've been open, um, we're still in a small community, like a small neighborhood school, right? So the neighborhood kind of built around us more than us coming into a neighborhood. So a lot of our families here have been in the neighborhood for years. Their grandkids are now attending our school that they once attended. I mean, we've been open for 70 years, so it's kind of a multi-generational area. It is changing over the last few years, so to kind of keep it more in a neighborhood style, as older generations are moving out, younger generations are moving in. We do hold a lot of parent engagement activities, such as parent nights. We try to involve our parents in little classes, especially now that we're going more tech heavy with COVID and things and the virtual learning that could be going on. Um, we're trying to give them tools to be able to help their children at home. But we also hold math and science nights. We hold literacy camp overnight. We hold bingo, like PTO events, like little bingo nights, and just fun stuff for them to be able to do. We try to bring in people from the museums and things when we can. We have a fantastic and active PTO. A lot of these parents have been on the committee for a few years as their children go through all the grades. They help us raise money so that we can hold events and also so we can purchase things for the school and for the kids. They help us out at Field Day, and we have a big fundraiser in the spring called Spaghetti Supper. It's like a carnival that we hold every year. That's a huge fundraiser for our school. So yeah, we always have great attendance at these events as well. So teachers are always asked to help volunteer these events. I will say the only one that is kind of a big one for our school is that spaghetti supper because it is on a Saturday and it does take a lot of my teachers' time. It is completely voluntary, but in our community, our teachers are there every year to make sure that it's a successful event. So,
okay, I did. Okay, so you mentioned extracurricular activities, and
mhm.
I'm very familiar with that. Is there extra duty pay for
Yes,
holding clubs?
yeah. So our teachers are, of course, if they're asked to volunteer or participate in anything outside of their contract hours, they're paid $25 an hour per the district policy.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
And supplies and resources like that, like dryer
Yes.
markers or such, for the classroom.
Yes.
How is that handled?
Oh, that's handled pretty well here. I do my best to make sure that I use my funds appropriately, and I always try to keep some funds around for my teachers in case there's anything that they need. Of course, we have a lot of different budget strands that I can pull money from depending on what it is, but definitely all of my teachers get paper. I know it's a big one with teachers. I give them all a box of paper each semester. But if you turn in, like, we have a request process for copies, and if you turn that in at the appropriate times that we ask, you don't have to use your own paper for copies. So, really, that paper is more for like classroom printing or if you need to make an emergency copy of something or something like that. Also, chart tablets, since I love Anchor charts so much and I want my teachers using those all the time and posting those around the room. I always make sure we have chart tablets in the office, dry erase markers, almost all your basic office supplies. You just need to ask Ms. Hernandez, our office secretary. There's a little form to fill out, and she'll get all those things for you. If there's anything outside of that, like that's much bigger that you need for the classroom, of course, just let me know, and we'll discuss what it's being used for, and if we have the funds to obtain that or not, and then we'll go from there. Is there anything else?
No, you've answered all my questions. I've enjoyed talking to you and hearing all about West Valley. So
Great. So how about I take you on a quick tour around the campus
yeah,
before you leave, just so you can kind of get a feel for what the school looks like.
I would love that. Thank you.
Great. All right, great. Well, and just so you know, I will reach out to you by the end of the week. I do have a few more people that I need to interview for the position, of course, but let's go ahead and take that tour before you leave, okay?
All right. Thank you. I'd love to.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Jakl.